everything. You don't need to announce your grind. You don't need validation, approval, or applause. Real progress doesn't make noise. It builds power. While others post their plans, everything. You're out there executing. While they seek recognition, you're seeking results. This audiobook is about mastering the discipline of silent growth. Learning to focus on yourself, everything. Build your foundation and let your success do the talking. It's not about isolation, it's about alignment. It's about transforming quiet focus into unstoppable momentum, everything. Because when you stop performing for the world, you finally start performing for your purpose. Silence isn't weakness, it's control. In a world that glorifies noise, everything, that celebrates the loudest voice in the room, silence has become misunderstood. We live in an age where people measure success not by what they build, but by how loudly they announce it. Everything. Every achievement, every goal, every dream, it's instantly shared, displayed, broadcasted. But real growth, the kind that lasts, doesn't happen in the spotlight. Everything. It happens in quiet rooms, late at night, when no one's watching. It happens in those silent mornings when you're still half asleep, but still choose to show up. Everything. Silence is where strength is born. The truth is, noise has become the enemy of progress. Not because it's inherently bad, everything, but because it distracts us from the very thing that moves us forward, focus. Every time you scroll through your phone, every time you compare your path to someone else's, everything, a little bit of your energy gets stolen. It's subtle. You don't feel it immediately. But over time, those small leaks drain your motivation, your clarity, your drive, everything. You start to question your pace, your worth, your direction. Not because you're lost, but because you've let the noise drown out your inner compass. Think about it. Everything. How often do you check your phone not out of need, but out of habit? How often do you open social media to just look and end up feeling behind, unmotivated, or anxious? Everything. The noise doesn't just steal your attention, it steals your peace. And without peace, it's nearly impossible to build anything meaningful. Everything. There's a reason the most successful people in the world often work in silence. They don't announce every move. They don't need to. Everything. They understand something most people miss, that progress is like planting a seed. If you dig it up every day to show it to people, it will never grow. The roots form in darkness, quietly. Everything. Below the surface. The work you do when no one is watching is what eventually breaks through and becomes visible to the world. You don't need to tell everyone what you're doing. Everything. You don't need to prove your effort. In fact, the more you protect your energy from the noise of validation, the more powerful your results become. Everything. Because when you stop performing for approval, you start performing for purpose. There's a story about a young athlete who wanted to become the best in his field. At first, he was loud about his dreams. He told everyone how he would rise, how he would win. But the more he talked, the less he trained. Every compliment became a small reward. Everything. A substitute for real progress. He realized that each time he told someone about his plan, he felt a burst of pride, a sense of achievement without any real action. So he stopped talking. Everything. He went silent. For months, he trained when no one was around. He posted nothing, said nothing, explained nothing. When the next season arrived, everything. His results spoke louder than any post ever could. That's the power of silence. It protects your intention. It keeps your fire pure. Everything. There's a deep satisfaction that comes from doing something quietly, just for yourself. Not for attention, not for likes, not for applause, but because it matters to you. Everything. That's where real confidence grows. Confidence isn't standing on a stage shouting, "Look at me." It's walking past the stage, smiling to yourself, knowing you don't need to. Everything. When you choose silence, you're not withdrawing from the world. You're reclaiming your focus. You're reminding yourself that not every thought needs to be shared. Everything. Not every step needs to be seen. In silence, you hear your own voice again. You rediscover what you actually want, not what the world tells you to chase. The greatest thinkers, creators, everything, and innovators have always understood this. Nikola Tesla worked in silence. He rarely spoke about his experiments. He let his discoveries do the talking. Everything. Steve Jobs spent months refining ideas behind closed doors before unveiling them to the world. Everything. Even artists like Leonardo da Vinci disappeared for years before revealing masterpieces that defined generations. They didn't need to tell people what they were doing every day. Everything. Their focus was sacred, and they protected it. You can do the same. You don't need to cut off the world completely, But you do need to filter what reaches you. Everything. Not every conversation deserves your attention. Not every update deserves your reaction. You have to create intentional silence, time without noise, without comparison, everything without distraction. Try this. Set aside 1 hour a day where you disconnect completely. No phone, no background music, no conversation. Just you and your thoughts. Everything. It will feel uncomfortable at first, almost unnatural, because we've been conditioned to fill every moment with stimulation. But if you can sit in that silence long enough, everything, you'll start to notice something powerful. Your thoughts slow down. Your priorities become clearer. You realize that half the things that stressed you out were never that important. Everything. Silence creates space, and in that space, creativity grows. When your mind isn't constantly reacting to external noise, it starts producing from within. Ideas surface. Solutions appear. Everything. Your intuition gets louder. What once felt like confusion becomes clarity. That's why people often say they get their best ideas in the shower. Everything. Or while walking alone. Because silence gives your subconscious a chance to speak. There's a kind of peace that comes from not needing to explain yourself. Everything. From knowing that your path is yours alone. Everyone's timeline is different. Some people bloom early, some much later. But when you stop comparing, you stop rushing. Everything. You start trusting the pace of your own process. That's when progress becomes sustainable. Imagine two builders. One rushes to build a tall tower as fast as possible. Everything, announcing every milestone to the world. The other spends months underground, laying the foundation. To the outside world, it seems like he's doing nothing. But when the storms come, everything. One tower collapses while the other stands unshaken. The difference wasn't in effort. It was in patience and focus. Silence is that foundation. Everything. It's what keeps you steady when everything around you gets loud. Working in silence doesn't mean you never celebrate your wins. It means you understand timing. You share results, everything, not reactions. You speak from experience, not expectation. There's a quiet power in letting people discover your progress on their own, in hearing someone say, everything. I didn't even know you were working on that, and smiling because you never needed them to. It's important to remember that silence is not about isolation or arrogance. Everything. It's not about shutting people out or hiding your journey. It's about protecting your energy, your vision, your peace. The more you share, the more opinions you invite. And opinions, everything, even well-intentioned ones, can cloud your judgment. When you learn to stay silent, you learn to listen. To your instincts, your purpose, and your truth, everything. We often underestimate how much noise we consume daily. The endless updates, opinions, arguments, and distractions, everything. Each one takes a small piece of our attention until we forget what we were even working toward. That's why silence is not just a tool for focus. Everything. It's a strategy for survival in a noisy world. It's a way of keeping your inner world calm, no matter how loud the outside becomes. There's strength in restraint. Everything. In holding back when you want to announce. In staying grounded when you want to prove something. It's in those moments of self-control that character is built. Everything. Because anyone can talk about what they're going to do. But it takes real discipline to stay quiet, work, and let time reveal the truth. If you truly believe in your vision, everything, you don't need to convince anyone. Belief doesn't require an audience. It requires action. Every hour you spend explaining your plan is an hour you could spend executing it. Everything. Every time you seek approval, you give away a little bit of your power. But every time you stay silent and keep moving, you gain it back. Everything. So the next time you feel the urge to announce your goals, pause. Ask yourself, am I sharing this for accountability or for validation? One will help you grow. Everything. The other will drain your focus. Remember, silence doesn't mean doing less. It means doing more of what matters without distraction. Everything. It's not about hiding your progress. It's about protecting your process. And in that protection lies the difference between temporary motivation and lasting success. Everything. Because when the noise fades and the spotlight moves on, only one thing remains. The quiet, consistent worker who never needed attention to stay committed. Everything. The one who understood that silence isn't emptiness. It's potential. It's power. It's control. Focus is not something you find. It's something you build. Everything. It's not a gift that falls into your lap one morning when the world finally goes quiet. It's a muscle. Trained through repetition, refined through friction. Everything. And strengthened every time you choose to stay with the task when your mind begs you to drift away. Most people never master focus because they never learn to be alone with their thoughts. Everything. The modern world has conditioned us to escape silence. The moment there's stillness, we reach for noise, a screen, a scroll, a song. We call it entertainment, everything. But what we're really doing is avoiding ourselves. Because when the distractions stop, you have to face what's actually happening inside your mind, the doubts, the resistance, everything, the impatience. And yet, that's exactly where mastery begins, in the uncomfortable quiet. There's a story of an athlete, not a famous one, everything. Just a regular man training in an empty gym before sunrise. No cameras, no hype, no audience. Just the sound of his breath echoing against the walls. Everything. He said later that those hours were his sanctuary, not his sacrifice. Because in that space, he wasn't performing. He was becoming everything. That's what building inner focus feels like. It's not about shutting the world out. It's about opening a deeper part of yourself that no one else can access. Everything. To train your mind to lock in, you have to understand something fundamental. Attention is your currency. Every thought, every notification, every meaningless distraction is a transaction. Everything. You are either investing your focus into something that compounds, or you're spending it on something that evaporates. Everything. The difference between average and exceptional isn't intelligence. It's investment. Exceptional people simply decide every single day where their mind is allowed to go. Everything. So ask yourself, where does your mind go when it's unguarded? Does it wander toward creation, or does it spiral into consumption? Most people spend more time reacting than creating. Everything. They react to messages, to opinions, to trends, living like a pinball, bouncing between other people's agendas. Focus begins the moment you reclaim that control. Everything. There's a quiet ritual I've seen among the most disciplined minds. They protect their first hour of the day like a sacred space. No phone, no input, no noise. Just direction. Everything. They center their thoughts on one intention, what matters most today. Not 10 goals. Not a to-do list a mile long. Just one. Everything. Because the human mind was never built to juggle everything. It was built to do one thing deeply. The power of focus multiplies when you simplify. Everything. If you've ever tried to sit in silence for even 10 minutes, you know how restless the mind becomes. Thoughts start shouting. You remember things you forgot to do. Everything. Worries appear from nowhere, and suddenly you're itching to check your phone again. That's not weakness. That's your brain detoxing from chaos. Everything. The first stage of building inner focus is mental withdrawal. The noise doesn't fade immediately. It fights to stay. You have to outlast it. Imagine your focus like a lens. Everything. When it's dirty, everything looks unclear. Tasks blur together, priorities fade, motivation flickers. Cleaning that lens means removing what doesn't serve you. Everything. The unnecessary opinions, the endless scrolling, the mental clutter of should and someday. You can't see your direction clearly until you stop looking everywhere else. Everything. In moments of distraction, it helps to return to your why. Why are you doing this? Why are you sitting here working when it would be easier to procrastinate? Everything. Why does this goal even matter to you? A strong why acts like gravity. It keeps you anchored when your attention starts to drift. The mind will always try to escape effort. Everything. But purpose gives you a reason to stay. Discipline, at its core, is the ability to keep your promises to yourself. Everything. Every time you tell yourself, I'll focus, and then break that commitment, your trust in yourself erodes a little. Everything. That's why building focus isn't just about productivity. It's about integrity. When you can trust yourself to do what you said you'd do, your mind stops resisting. Everything. It starts cooperating. You begin to move from effort into flow. One of the most powerful habits you can create is deep work, uninterrupted time dedicated to one meaningful task. Everything, not multitasking, not partial attention, just immersion. Studies show that even a single notification can derail your concentration for minutes at a time. Everything. Every interruption costs energy to recover. So train yourself to enter isolation, not as punishment, but as precision. Set a timer. Close the tabs. Put the phone in another room. Everything. Let the world wait. At first, your mind will resist. It will look for reasons to stop. Everything. Maybe I should grab a snack. Maybe I should check that message. That's the old you. The unfocused you. Trying to reclaim control. Ignore the noise. Finish the timer. Everything. Build that endurance. Just like a runner builds stamina one lap at a time, your brain builds focus in blocks. Every time you push through discomfort, everything, you're rewiring your mind to stay longer, deeper, calmer. Over time, something changes. The noise outside starts to lose its grip. You'll notice you no longer crave constant stimulation. Everything. You'll stop needing to announce your progress. You'll begin to value solitude not as loneliness, but as leverage. Because in silence you think clearer. You make decisions faster. Everything. You create better. You become unshakable. Real focus isn't loud. It doesn't need hype. It's the quiet rhythm of someone in control of their inner world. Everything. It's the writer who disappears for hours into their work. The athlete who runs drills long after practice ends. The entrepreneur who builds systems in the dark. Everything. Preparing for opportunities the world hasn't seen yet. Focus isn't a mood. It's a lifestyle. There's a reason monks, elite performers, everything, and top creators all practice some form of mindfulness. Not because it's trendy, but because stillness is strength. When your mind is calm, your decisions sharpen. Everything. When your emotions are steady, your performance improves. When your attention is undivided, you become powerful. Meditation, journaling, breathwork. These are not luxuries. Everything. They are tools for mental alignment. And yet, building inner focus doesn't mean cutting the world off completely. It's about choosing when to engage. The goal isn't to live in a cave. Everything. It's to move through chaos with composure. To be in the noise but not consumed by it. To hear distraction knock on your door and calmly decide not to answer. Everything. I once met a man who described his daily life as a storm: business pressures, family demands, constant decisions. Yet he was always composed. I asked him how. He said, everything. I keep a space inside me that's untouched by the world. No matter what happens out there, in here, everything, I stay still. That's inner focus, the ability to hold peace in the middle of motion. When you learn to focus, life feels lighter. You stop overthinking every move. You stop rushing everything. You stop comparing. You start trusting. Trusting that what you're doing is enough. Trusting that progress compounds. Trusting that the quiet work you do now will echo later. Everything. Focus gives you that calm confidence. The peace that comes from self-mastery. There's beauty in watching your own growth unfold slowly, quietly, without anyone noticing. Everything. You'll look back months from now and realize how much your mind has changed. The noise that used to distract you will feel foreign. The old patterns will lose their pull. Everything. You'll begin to crave clarity the way others crave attention. So, train your mind daily. Protect your focus like it's sacred, because it is. Everything. Every moment of clarity you preserve is a step closer to your highest potential. When the rest of the world is busy performing, you'll be progressing. When they chase applause, everything, you'll chase alignment. And when they wonder how you did it, you'll smile. Because you know the answer isn't luck. It's silence. It's focus. Everything. It's the quiet discipline of someone who decided that their purpose was worth their full attention. That's how you train the mind to lock in. Not by fighting distraction, everything, but by mastering yourself. Because once you control your mind, you control everything else. There's a certain kind of power that comes from being unseen. From showing up, day after day, everything. Doing the work no one claps for. You wake up. You move with purpose, you build quietly, and though the world may not notice, something deep inside you begins to shift. Everything. You start to trust yourself. You start to respect the person you're becoming. That's what it means to work like a ghost. To move in silence, to build without noise. Everything. To chase excellence for its own sake. Most people want to be seen working. They want credit for the effort before the result ever arrives. But when you're working like a ghost, everything. Recognition isn't your fuel. Progress is. You understand that the real transformation happens behind the curtain, when no one's watching, no one's cheering. Everything. And the only validation that exists comes from the sweat on your own hands. Think about a seed buried beneath the soil. No one sees it. It doesn't post updates about its growth. Everything. It just absorbs light, water, and time. And one day, it breaks through the surface, quietly but powerfully. That's the essence of invisible progress. Everything. The seed doesn't rush the process or beg to be seen. It trusts that its work beneath the surface will eventually show. The same is true for you. The world may not see your late nights, everything. The quiet sacrifices, the inner battles, the moments when you almost gave up but didn't. But those are the moments that shape you. Every small, unseen action compounds. Everything. Every repetition builds strength. Every hour spent in solitude improving your craft becomes a brick in the foundation of your future. Everything. Working like a ghost is not about isolation. It's about dedication. It's not about hiding from the world, but about building something real before showing it. Everything. When you operate in silence, you eliminate distractions. You protect your energy. You stop performing and start creating everything. There's a story about a young athlete who trained for years without recognition. He didn't post his workouts, didn't boast about his routines, didn't chase attention, everything. His teammates used to tease him for being quiet, for skipping parties, for training when no one else was watching. But when the season came and the lights finally turned on, everything. He moved differently. He was sharper, faster, unshakable. Because while everyone else was performing for approval, he was preparing for dominance. Everything. That's what happens when you build in silence. You create an element of surprise. You move past ego. You stop trying to prove and start becoming everything. And when the moment comes to show what you've built, the results speak louder than anything you could have said. Invisible progress requires patience. Everything. It demands that you play the long game. We live in a world addicted to speed. Instant likes, instant success, instant validation. But real mastery doesn't operate on a quick timeline. Everything. You don't get to skip the quiet years. The quiet years are where you become dangerous. Think of any great creator, athlete, or visionary. Before their breakthrough, everything. There were years of obscurity, nights spent refining, failing, rebuilding. The musician who played in empty bars before selling out arenas. Everything. The entrepreneur who worked from a tiny room before building a global company. The writer who spent years with only a blank page for company. The public always sees the success, everything, but never the solitude that built it. And that's the trap. We compare our behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel. Everything. We forget that everyone who has achieved something remarkable has had seasons where no one cared, no one noticed, and nothing seemed to move. But those seasons were the forge. Everything. The silence was their teacher. When you're working like a ghost, you start to detach from applause. You don't need people to see your effort to know your worth. Everything. You stop measuring success by how loud your life is, and instead, by how aligned your actions are with your purpose. That's where freedom begins. When your motivation comes from within, everything, not from the noise outside. Invisible progress also teaches humility. It reminds you that greatness isn't about how much attention you command, but how much value you create. Everything. There's a quiet pride that comes with knowing you're putting in the work, even when no one's watching. Everything. It's the pride of integrity, doing the right thing simply because it's who you are. You can see this truth in nature. The tallest trees grow slowly. Everything. The strongest structures are built below ground first. What you can't see is always supporting what you can. That's how your growth works too. The late nights, the small efforts, everything. The private disciplines. They become the root system of your success. Sometimes it will feel lonely. You'll wonder if it's worth it, if all this effort, all this silence, everything, will ever pay off. But that's where faith steps in. The faith that what you're building matters, even if no one sees it yet. The faith that one day, everything, the results will make sense of all the effort. There's a quote that says, "Work hard in silence, let success make the noise." It's not just poetic. It's practical wisdom. Everything. The more energy you spend proving yourself, the less energy you have to improve yourself. Every minute spent explaining what you're doing is a minute stolen from doing it. Everything. The greatest form of proof is progress. Working like a ghost also changes how you experience time. You stop rushing toward outcomes and start falling in love with the process. Everything. You learn to find satisfaction in small steps, the daily habits, the little wins, the quiet improvements that no one else notices. When you do that, every day becomes a victory. Everything. Imagine an artist spending months perfecting a single painting, not for recognition, but because the act of creating is reward enough. Or a person going to the gym every morning. Everything. Not for the selfie, but for the strength, the discipline, the mental clarity. That's the mindset of invisible progress. When the journey itself becomes your motivation. Everything. And it's not easy. There will be days when you crave acknowledgement, when you want someone to notice how hard you're trying. Everything. When you question whether anyone will ever see the value in what you're building. But remember this, every master was once invisible. Every legend once worked in silence. Everything. The spotlight doesn't create greatness, it reveals it. When you work like a ghost, you develop resilience. Because when you stop depending on external rewards, you become unshakable. Everything. You learn to keep moving even when there's no applause. You keep building even when no one believes. You keep trusting even when the path isn't clear. Everything. That's how you become unstoppable. By learning to move without needing permission, you'll notice something beautiful happen over time. The people who doubted you, who overlooked you, everything, who ignored your efforts, they'll start to wonder how you did it. They'll say it happened overnight, but you'll know the truth. It happened in the shadows, in the silence, everything, in the moments you chose work over words. And when the results finally show, you won't need to scream. You won't need to prove everything. Because your progress will speak in a language louder than noise. The language of consistency, the sound of undeniable truth. Invisible progress is a test of belief. Belief in yourself, everything, in your purpose, in the unseen compound effect of effort. Every time you choose discipline over distraction, every time you show up quietly, everything, every time you keep going without praise, you're not just moving forward, you're transforming. So keep working like a ghost. Move with intention. Let your silence be strategy, everything. Let your focus be your signature. The world doesn't need to see every step. It only needs to see the result when it's ready. Because in the end, the loudest people rarely last, everything. The ones who endure, the ones who rise, the ones who redefine what's possible. They're the ones who mastered the art of invisible progress. They learned to build without noise, everything, to move without validation, to trust without fear. Work quietly, build faithfully, and when your moment comes, let your results echo through the silence you once lived in, everything. There comes a point in every person's journey when you realize that the need for validation is the very thing holding you back. You may start strong, full of ideas and ambition, everything. But somewhere along the way, you start watching instead of working. You post a small win and refresh the screen to see who liked it. You share your goals and then wait for someone to say, everything. That's amazing. You begin to crave acknowledgement more than progress. It's subtle at first, it feels harmless, but slowly, everything. Your drive becomes dependent on the response of others. And when the applause fades, your motivation fades with it. This chapter is about breaking that cycle, everything. It's about learning to move without needing the world to clap. Because the truth is, every person who's ever built something truly meaningful, every artist, athlete, entrepreneur, everything, and leader, has had to walk through seasons of silence. They've had to do their work in the dark, without validation, without reassurance, and sometimes even against criticism, everything. They learn to validate themselves, not through praise but through presence. Detachment from validation doesn't mean you stop caring about people or feedback, everything. It means you stop needing it to feel worthy. It means your self-belief becomes the foundation and everything else becomes noise, everything. Think about how much energy is wasted in the pursuit of approval. You finish a project, and instead of feeling proud, you immediately compare, everything. You scroll through someone else's highlight reel and question your progress. You hesitate to start something because you're afraid of how it'll look if it fails, everything. That hesitation, that tiny pause, is the moment validation takes power over you. But imagine this instead: you wake up, and the only person you aim to impress is the one in the mirror, everything. You create because you must, not because you want applause. You move forward even when no one's watching, even when no one understands. That's freedom, the freedom of self-belief, everything. There's a story I often think about. A young athlete trained for years, waking up before sunrise to run, lift, and practice alone. His friends laughed, saying he was obsessed, everything. His family worried he was wasting his time. There was no audience, no recognition, no viral moment. But years later, when he finally stepped into the spotlight, everything. People called him an overnight success. They didn't see the silence, the rejection, the early mornings, the lonely grind. He smiled and said nothing, everything, because he knew that true validation comes from doing the work when no one's clapping. That's what detachment feels like. It's not apathy, it's power, everything. It's a calm knowing that your worth doesn't fluctuate with opinion. We live in a world where everything is scored, rated, and reviewed. You can see numbers tied to your name, likes, everything, views, followers, metrics. It's easy to confuse those numbers with meaning. But they're not proof of value, they're proof of visibility. There's a big difference, everything. Some of the most brilliant people on earth are invisible, quietly building, creating, thinking, refining. They're not posting every moment because they don't need to, everything. Their validation comes from the work itself. The danger of chasing validation is that it trains your brain to perform instead of progress, everything. You start choosing what looks impressive over what truly matters. You begin editing your journey to fit a narrative. One that's more about being seen than being fulfilled, everything. And that's where the disconnection begins. You're no longer living your truth, you're living a filtered version of it. Let's be honest. Validation feels good, everything. It's human to want acknowledgement. We all need connection. But there's a line between appreciation and addiction. When validation becomes your fuel, you're in danger, everything. Because what happens when it's gone? What happens when the crowd goes silent? Do you still show up? True freedom begins the moment you realize you can keep going without applause, everything. When your self-talk becomes louder than public opinion. When you no longer need to explain, prove, or justify your path. That's the kind of confidence that lasts, everything. There's an exercise I sometimes suggest. Take a day, just one, and go completely unnoticed. Don't post, don't share, don't explain your plans or your progress, everything. Just do your work in silence. Feel what that's like. At first, it might feel uncomfortable. You might catch yourself thinking, everything. Does this even matter if no one sees it? But that discomfort is exactly the point. It's the withdrawal from external validation. And on the other side of it, everything. You'll find peace. The kind that comes from knowing your work matters simply because you said it does. We often look at validation as a motivator, everything. But the strongest motivator isn't being liked. It's being aligned. When your vision, your values, and your actions line up, you no longer need to be told you're on the right path. Everything you feel it. That's alignment. And alignment is far more powerful than approval. Think about the great innovators, the ones who were mocked, doubted, everything, or dismissed before they were celebrated. They weren't waiting for the world to say yes. They moved because something inside them already had. Self-belief was their compass, everything. And that's what kept them steady when the world said no. One of the hardest truths you'll ever face is that not everyone will understand your journey, everything. Some people will misinterpret your silence as arrogance, your focus as distance, your ambition as obsession. That's okay. You don't owe them clarity. You owe yourself consistency, everything. There's a quiet strength in walking your path without needing validation. It means you trust your intuition more than opinions. You trust your process more than projections, everything. You trust your timing more than trends. And here's what's beautiful about that. Once you no longer need validation, you actually become more authentic. You speak with more conviction, everything. Create with more truth and lead with more integrity. Because you're no longer editing yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You're free to just be, everything. There's a subtle shift that happens when you detach. The same criticism that once cut deep now sounds like background noise, everything. The same lack of recognition that once discouraged you now fuels you, because you realize the only validation that matters is the validation that comes from keeping your word to yourself, everything. Every time you say you'll do something and follow through, you build trust, not with others, with you. And that self-trust is the foundation of self-belief. When you say, everything, I'll show up, and you actually do day after day, even when no one notices, that's when you become unstoppable. In the quiet moments when no one's watching, everything, your mind will test you. It'll whisper, does this matter? Does anyone care? And your answer has to be simple, everything. I do. That's the essence of detachment, caring enough about your mission to keep moving, even when it feels invisible. When you stop chasing validation, something magical happens, everything. You start attracting respect. Not because you asked for it, but because people can feel authenticity. Real confidence doesn't scream, it radiates. It doesn't need to be proven, everything, it's felt. So when you feel the pull to share your every step for approval, pause. Ask yourself, everything, am I sharing from truth or from fear? If it's from truth, because you genuinely want to inspire, connect, or contribute, do it. But if it's from fear, fear of not being seen, everything, not being enough, that's the moment to step back. That's the moment to go silent and return to your why. The most powerful version of you doesn't need to convince anyone, everything. You just are. You're grounded in your craft, committed to your growth, and content in your own timing, everything. Every great transformation begins with quiet conviction, the decision to keep believing when the world gives you no reason to, everything. That's what separates the ones who quit from the ones who rise. The ones who wait for approval live small, the ones who move without it. They create their own gravity, everything. And here's the secret few will tell you. Once you master self-belief, validation no longer feels necessary. It feels nice, sure, but it no longer defines you, everything. Because you've already found something better, peace. purpose, and power that no one can take away. That's the freedom you've been chasing all along. Not the applause, everything, but the inner silence that says, I am enough and I'm moving forward anyway. There's a moment somewhere along your journey when you stop trying to prove yourself. You stop explaining everything, defending or convincing. You no longer need to justify your effort to anyone because the work, the progress, the transformation, it speaks for itself. Everything. That's what this chapter is about. Living as proof. Becoming the kind of person whose life, energy, and results are their loudest statement. Everything. When you've spent enough time in the shadows, working quietly, learning, failing, refining, something changes. You begin to build an inner calm that can't be faked. Everything. You stop rushing to show progress because you've learned that real growth doesn't need witnesses. And one day, everything. You look around and realize that everything you once had to explain is now undeniable. That's the power of letting your results speak. Everything. Think about people who carry that quiet presence. The ones who walk into a room and don't need to say a word, yet everyone feels something. It's not arrogance, it's certainty. Everything. It's the weight of self-trust, the calm that comes from knowing you've done the work. They don't need to advertise their success. Everything. Because success radiates from how they carry themselves. Their words are measured, their energy steady, their confidence unshaken. That's not luck or charisma. That's earned peace. Everything. It's easy to crave recognition when you're just starting out. Everyone wants to be seen, to be acknowledged, to know their effort matters. But here's the truth. Everything. The need to prove yourself fades the moment you truly believe in yourself. External validation becomes background noise. Everything. You stop chasing approval because you've already approved of yourself. And that approval, that deep inner knowing, becomes the foundation of lasting success. Everything. There's a story of a young athlete who used to post every workout, every training session, every little win on social media. He was talented, everything. But he was distracted, addicted to the feedback loop of likes and comments. His coach pulled him aside one day and said, "When you're busy showing the world how hard you're working, everything, you're not actually working as hard as you could." The words stung, but he took them to heart. He went quiet, stopped posting, stopped announcing. He focused. Months passed, then years, everything. And when he came back, the difference was visible, stronger, faster, sharper. People asked, "Where have you been?" He smiled and said, "Everything building." That's the mindset of someone who lives as proof. They don't need to tell their story. Their growth tells it for them. Everything. There's a deep dignity in that kind of silence. The world today rewards noise. It celebrates the appearance of progress more than progress itself. Everything. We're surrounded by people who talk more about what they're going to do than what they've actually done. But the most powerful individuals are often the quietest. Everything. They're too busy evolving to announce every step. They're not concerned with looking successful. They're committed to being successful. This doesn't mean you stay invisible forever. Everything. It means your visibility becomes a byproduct of your excellence, not your strategy. When your work is real, people will notice. When your results are undeniable, everything. Your silence becomes your amplifier. The right people will see you, the right doors will open, and you won't have to beg for attention. Because your presence commands it. Everything. But to reach that level, you have to fall in love with delayed validation. You have to accept that progress happens long before it's visible. The seeds of success grow underground. Everything, in darkness, in solitude. Think of a tree. Before it ever breaks the surface, its roots are spreading deep beneath the soil, unseen but essential. That's how greatness works. Everything. If you rush to show the world your growth before it's ready, you expose roots that should have stayed protected. Give your dreams time to mature in silence. When they finally emerge, everything, they'll be unshakable. This principle applies to everything. Your career, your fitness, your relationships, your art, everything. When you stop performing for the crowd and start performing for your craft, everything changes. You become more efficient, more precise, more fulfilled. Everything. Because now your motivation comes from the inside, not the outside. And that's a level of power nobody can take from you. Everything. Quiet confidence isn't about speaking less. It's about needing less from the world. It's the ability to walk into a situation, do your best work, everything, and walk away without seeking applause. You know your worth because you've earned it. You know your strength because you've tested it in silence. Everything. That's what separates professionals from amateurs, leaders from followers, and fulfilled individuals from anxious ones. Let's talk about grace under pressure. Everything. When you're anchored in purpose, challenges don't shake you the same way anymore. You handle setbacks differently because you trust the process. You know that results aren't instant, everything, but inevitable when you stay consistent. While others panic, you adapt. While others complain, you adjust. And that calm, that ability to stay grounded, becomes your competitive edge. Everything. Imagine a fighter in the ring. The crowd's screaming, lights are blinding, pressure is immense. But the best fighters don't flinch. Their breathing is steady. Their focus locked in. Everything. They're not distracted by the noise. They've trained for this moment in silence. Every repetition, every early morning, every lonely night led to this calm in chaos. Everything. That's grace under pressure. And that's what allows them to perform when it matters most. In life, you'll face those moments too. Pressure from expectations, deadlines, or uncertainty. Everything. But if you've built your foundation quietly, you'll respond differently. You won't need to prove your capability. You'll simply demonstrate it. You'll act instead of react. Everything. Speak only when necessary. Move with purpose, not impulse. That's the art of quiet dominance, not needing to overpower, just being undeniable. Here's the thing. Everything. True strength isn't loud. It's stable. It's the stillness before the storm, the calm after the chaos, the presence that doesn't waver no matter who's watching. Everything. When you cultivate that energy, people start to sense it. They may not know what's different about you, but they'll feel it. Everything. That's what happens when silence becomes strength. It turns into an aura, an unspoken authority. But how do you build it? You start by keeping promises to yourself. Everything. You show up when no one's checking. You do the work without announcing it. You track your progress privately. You take accountability quietly. Everything. Every time you follow through on what you said you'd do, you strengthen the voice of self-trust inside you. Over time, that voice becomes louder than any external opinion. Everything. That's how quiet confidence is built, one kept promise at a time. And then something amazing happens. You stop chasing things that don't align with you. You stop forcing opportunities. Everything. Stop begging to be seen. Stop explaining your value. You realize that energy spent convincing others could be used creating something undeniable. The louder your results become. Everything, the less you need to speak. It's not arrogance. It's self-respect. You're no longer performing for applause. You're performing for mastery. Everything. You no longer measure yourself by recognition but by growth. And once you understand that, peace arrives. Because the world can't take away what it didn't give you. Your discipline. Everything, your integrity, your focus. Every success story has a quiet chapter, the part no one sees, the early mornings, the rejected ideas, the lonely hours of practice. Everything. That's where identity is built. When the recognition finally comes, it's not a surprise, it's confirmation. The results aren't luck, they're receipts. Everything. Proof of every unseen effort that came before. When your results start to speak, let them. Don't rush to add commentary. Don't downplay them, and don't over-explain them. Everything. Just keep working. Let your consistency tell the story. Because results have a language of their own, they command respect without demanding it. Everything. They inspire others without needing to preach. They remind the world that silence was never a weakness, it was preparation. And so you keep going, steady, grounded, clear. Everything. You lead with quiet confidence, move with grace, and allow your life to be the message. Because when you've done the work in silence, you never have to announce that you're ready. You already are.